Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's webinar in the Whole Farm Efficiency webinar series. So today is our last February session, but we still have two more in the next couple weeks. Before we start, I want to thank this webinar sponsor, and remember that without their support, we're able to bring to you these programs at no cost. So thank you, CattleScan. Without further ado, I want to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Julio Giordano. He's going to be talking about how to improve dairy herd performance and management with targeted reproduction management programs.
Awesome. It's always great to share with you the work that we're doing and our experiences. And today, we're going to be talking about this concept of targeted reproductive management. And here we have a milk bucket. And you may wonder, so why buckets? Did Julio go crazy? Will I be at a webinar that want to talk about milk buckets? And we're going to use milk buckets as an analogy. We're going to use buckets as an analogy to what it is, how do we implement, and what are some of the potential benefits of this concept of targeted reproductive management, also known as precision management or selective management. So different people call the same thing different ways. So we're always talking about the same thing. We call it targeted management, but precision management, selective management, it's the same concept. And this whole webinar series are about efficiencies, how to improve dairy herd efficiency. So we want to see how we can at least try to improve either efficiencies through improvements in management or in performance through the use of targeted or precision reproductive management. So you have to wonder why. So why this concept now of targeted management? And I'm sure that everyone is well aware of the fact that most farms, or the average farm, will manage for repro, will manage all cows the same. So we tend to implement the same reproductive management program for all cows. However, everyone must be well aware too that not all cows are the same. And of course, it's not that we have cows of different colors, although some farms actually do have cows of different colors, but at least they are not green, yellow, or orange. But the point is that from a cow perspective, from the cow biology, from a cow physiology perspective, and the potential, the reproductive and the productive potential of cows are all different. And that's something new that applies not just to reproduction, but all areas of cow biology and performance. Milk production and the ability to survive in a herd, and health, and all the things that we really care about cows. But in repro, again, in most farms, we still put all cows in the same bucket. So despite these biological differences, despite these known differences in expected performance, we still put them all in the same bucket. We'll still breed all our cows the same way. There's no differentiation. Why do we do that? Well, we do that because we have made tremendous progress in the last 15, 20 years in repro management programs, and dairies have been very successful implementing that. And we have actually gone from this idea of managing cows in different buckets or individually to let's manage all cows the same. Let's give them all the same treatment. Why? Because it works. It works, and it works really, really well. We have tremendous reproductive performance in a lot of farms. And it has also gotten to be a lot easier than in the past. We have dairy herd management software. We have a lot of different technologies that makes putting all cows in the same bucket very easy. So if it works and it's easy, why wouldn't we do that, right? So, of course, especially for us in research, we're always wondering, is that the best that we can do? Yeah, we know that it works. We know that it's simple, but does it mean that it's the best that we can do today? Is that the best that we can do in the future? So we're going to challenge that a little bit today. And we are going to go over some of the latest research that we have been doing, as well as others, on this idea of putting cows in different buckets for reproductive management. So instead of having that single one, we're going to put cows in bucket A, B, or C, or whatever way we're going to label those buckets, and that doesn't matter. The point is that we find the cows that look the same, and they look the same from their potential. So what they can do or cannot do, and therefore we can then put them on these different buckets. So we can treat cows within these buckets differently. Okay, so we can try to optimize the performance of cows in these different buckets in a way that we couldn't do if we put them all in the same one, that if we manage them all the same way. Of course, you have to wonder why and what exactly are we chasing here? Well, we are chasing this idea that there may be either metrics of performance or areas of dairy herd management that we can improve when we go from putting all the cows in the same bucket versus putting in different buckets, whether it's improving the 21-day pregnancy rate, whether it's breeding more cows in heat instead of breeding more cows with time AI. So letting cows show estrus and reduce the need for breeding cows through time AI programs. So can we put cows in different buckets so we accomplish that goal? Another bucket that a lot of people, a lot of producers, a lot of consultants are very familiar. We are doing this. More and more dairies are doing this. So we are now putting cows in different buckets as far as the type of semen that we put on cows, right? So the use of beef on dairy, instead of breeding every cow to have a heifer, a calf of the dairy breed of interest, whether it's Holstein or whatever it is, we are breeding now cows with different type of semen. That's another example of putting cows in different buckets to optimize. We don't optimize performance. We don't get a better pregnancy rate, but we make more money by having those crossbred calves be born from more cows. So again, to wrap it up in terms of what this is about is, again, the idea of going from a model of dairy herd management in which we treat every cow in the herd the same, to recognize that there are differences between cows, that there are differences in terms of the expected performance, the biology of the cow, so we can treat them differently. We treat them with different repro programs, different strategies, hoping that we're going to optimize the performance of these subgroups more than if we put them all in the same bucket, right? So if we do something different with the green cows versus the red cows, we expect to do a little bit better. And as a whole, we expect to do better than when we treat all cows the same. So by putting cows in different groups, in different buckets, we expect that overall we're going to gain more, either performance or management, or of course both. You know, we always want to gain as much as we can, but in some cases the benefit may just be an improvement in herd management. In other cases it may be in performance, and in other cases maybe both. So now we keep going with questions, right? So how do we do it? How do we put cows in buckets? How much can we gain by putting cows in buckets? So that's what I'm going to show you now. And I have this guy here on the top of the iceberg to mean kind of how we as researchers feel, and probably this is how a lot of you feel as well. And the point is that we are just seeing part of, you know, just the surface, but there's a whole lot of stuff underneath that we are trying to figure out how to bring it up to the surface. We still have a lot to learn, and you will see that today when I show you what we have done and where we are going. You know, we are just scratching the surface of this whole area of targeted management. So as part of the how is very important. How do we put the different cows in the different buckets, okay? So I'm going to talk to you today about 3 ways of putting cows in buckets, and I'll show you what the consequences of that are. We're going to put cows in buckets based on whether or not they show estrus, so if they show a heat during the voluntary waiting period. We're going to put cows in buckets as a way to improve fertility by promoting heat expression, by promoting expression of estrus during zinc protocols or at the end of zinc protocols. And then we'll also do that based on what cows have on their ovaries when we find them open at the first preg check. So based on their ovarian status. So estrus or heat, right? So we have been exploring the use of expression of estrus or heat expression as a way to predict the future reproductive potential of cows and as a way to increase fertility, okay? So those are the 2 things that we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about heat buckets. We're going to put cows in buckets based on whether or not they show a heat during a certain time in the lactation, whether it's the voluntary waiting period or during a zinc program. So here we have the first way of putting cows in heat buckets. And that has to do with something that we have known for a long time. This should not be news to most of you. So everyone knows that cows start cycling after calving, and that the sooner cows start cycling after calving, the better they will do in the future. And the more heats they have before we start breeding them, the better they will do. So in the past, it was a little bit hard to keep track of that. Not a lot of farms would keep track of heats from calving until the end of the voluntary waiting period, when cows start to be bred, right? Today, we have technology, and we have technologies that can do this really well and very easily for us. We have the automated heat detection systems or automated activity monitoring systems, whatever way you know them. We have ear tags, leg tags, neck tags, and a variety of technologies to detect heat. The proposition here is that we're going to use heat during the voluntary waiting period detected by the systems to put cows in a heat group and a no heat group. And a very important thing, whenever you think about buckets, do you have enough cows to put on each bucket? And here you have a little bit of data that supports why we could use heats during the voluntary waiting period to put cows in buckets. And that is because about half of the cows in our lactating herds are going to be detected in heat with these automated systems. A little bit over half, 2 studies, one with an ear tag, one with a neck tag. The average was 56% of the cows had at least 1 heat during the voluntary waiting period of 50 days, as you can see here. The other 44% of the cows did not have a heat. Now, what you have to wonder about is, so why do I care, right? So why does this matter? And how can this help put cows in buckets? Well, you have to wonder about, are there differences in reproductive performance for cows with a heat versus no heat during the voluntary waiting period? So here's data from these experiments again, all combined. So the cows in red, the cows that have at least 1 heat during the voluntary waiting period versus the ones that didn't have a heat. The cows with a heat were not 40% more likely, but 40% more cows showed a heat again within about 3 weeks of the end of the voluntary waiting period of 50 days. So they are more likely to show a heat, and they show a heat faster than the cows in blue. So the fact that they are cyclic already during the voluntary waiting period, that, you know, is associated with greater likelihood and faster time to estrus or heat after the end of the voluntary waiting. That's a pretty significant, so it's not only statistically significant, but it's a big difference, right? 40% more of the cows showed a heat within 3 weeks after the 50-day voluntary waiting period. 9% difference in conception rate at first breeding, so 41 versus 32%. Cows with a heat, better first service conception rate. Cows with a heat during the voluntary waiting period, 12% more of them were pregnant at 150 days after calving, at 150 days in milk. So that's a pretty significant difference, substantial difference in cows pregnant. So cows are more likely to show a heat again, and they do it faster. They are more likely to get pregnant at first breeding, and they are more likely to be pregnant by 150 days. So just by knowing that, did the cow show a heat or didn't the cow show a heat? Okay, so that's the difference. So now the question is, what can we do with that? So what exactly can we do with that, knowing that cows show heat or not? So I'll show you the outcome, and then I'll show what can be done, and then I'll show you what the performance of this type of program can be in comparison to some of the other programs that we run today on farms. So the value proposition here, what I'm telling you that is possible to do, is to separate cows based on heat versus no heat during the voluntary waiting period. So if they had at least one alert from the automated systems before 50 days in milk. So we proposed and we hypothesized for our research that the heat cows are better candidates to be managed with programs that use more heat detection and use less time AI. So reduce the use of time AI and let the cows show heat. On the other hand, the no-heat cows, knowing that they're not going to be as good at showing a heat again, at getting pregnant if bred in heat, the proposition is to use them, to manage them with programs that use a little bit less of heat detection and use time AI a little more strategically. So just as one example of what has been proven in research, and we know that it can work. So cows that had a heat during the voluntary waiting period could be given somewhere between 28 to 34 days, so about a month after the end of the voluntary waiting period of 50 days, to be detected in heat with automated heat alerts or any other way. It doesn't matter. We did the trials with heat detection through automated systems. So farms can do that, but what matters is heat detection. Well done, no matter how it's done. So give these cows the chance to be bred in heat. If they are not bred in heat within those 28 to 34 days, they have to be enrolled in a sync protocol. They have to be enrolled in a sync program. We use an off-sync protocol with CEDARs, and I'll show you later that program in more detail. And this program can vary. I mean, it's up to the farm to decide what's best to do. This is what we do in our trials, and we know that it works. On the other hand, for the cows that we know that they are less likely to show a heat, they are less likely to be pregnant if they are bred to a heat, we give them some time to show heat. It's not that we don't give them any time. We still let them show heat, because there are some cows that the reason why they didn't get detected by 50 days is because they are just a little bit behind, but eventually they do show heat. And here overall, we are trying to breed as many cows in heat as possible. So we give them a couple of weeks to 3 weeks to show heat. And I'll tell you later what my preferences are. But this is what research has shown that it works. Same thing, if they are detected in heat, we breed them. If they are not detected, they are enrolled in a sync program. So by 90 days, the heat cows, or 76 days, the no heat cows, every single cow has already been bred at least once. And remember, reducing days in milk at first breeding is important. So this is what we call it targeted. So this is targeted because we are targeting the heat cows and the no heat cows with different strategies, with different programs. So we call this a targeted predominant heat, because we are trying to breed as many cows in heat as possible. So I'll show you now, how does this compare to some of what a lot of other farms, what a lot of farms are doing, and very successfully, and almost what you can consider to be like the gold standard today as far as first breeding programs. And so I'm going to show you here on top, you have targeted programs, or these programs that combine first heat detection. And again, if the cow is not detected in heat, the cow is synchronized and gets time AI. Versus, or compared to, syncing every single cow for first breeding and time AI for all cows. So all time AI programs, typically with fertility programs, as we call double op sync, G6G, pre-sync opsync, any of the fantastic, we have really, really good programs to do that. And something that a lot of dairies do too, because they know that they're going to breed all cows through time AI and they do pretty well, and they are trying to optimize first service conception rates. They are going to extend the voluntary waiting period. So they're going to breed cows a little bit later, and this is important here, and I'll emphasize that a little bit later. But the point is that we use this program to see how well our proposed targeted management program would fare against what we know that works really, really well. So here comes this part that's a little more boring. Okay, I'm sorry for that. I'll just very quickly show you what we compare here. So the same program that I described before, the targeted predominant heat detection combined with time AI with the same number of days for heat detection and the same protocol. So it's the program that I just described on my previous slide. We also had one without any separation of cows in heat versus no heat. We wanted to see how the targeted program would compare to not doing anything, no separation. And then we had, again, this fertility program, double opsing with the 2 prostaglandins at the end, with a voluntary waiting period of 81 to 87 days, which we know that optimizes fertility. That is very good to optimize first service conception. So I'll now in English, very simple, okay, very simple. What you can expect, what have we seen in our experiments, that we have done more than one now, and the results are quite consistent, okay? So when you use this type of targeted management program for lactating cows at a dairy, and you compare that to a double opsing with 2 prostaglandins and a longer voluntary waiting period, you almost for sure will observe that conception rate at first breeding is going to be less. So it's going to be less, anywhere from 4 points to 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10 points less first service conception rate. But first service conception rate is not the most important metric of reproductive performance, right? So we have the preg rate, so the speed at which the cows get pregnant. So, how quickly cows are getting pregnant after calving or after the end of the voluntary waiting period. So when we measure that, there is no difference, okay? So this targeted program can do as well as this very intensive, involved double opsing with 2 prostaglandins with an extended voluntary waiting period. So the same pregnancy rate after calving, the same days open, same percentage of pregnant cows at 150 days in milk. So will there be a difference in first service conception rate? Yes, most likely. But the preg rate and the percentage of cows that are pregnant at the end of lactation is the same. So now a lot of you are very familiar with the 21-day pregnancy rate, whether it's from DairyComp or other dairy herd management software. They are all very similar in the way they calculate. So I'm showing you here what the results were for 21-day pregnancy rates for, again, the all-time AI with double opsync and the longer voluntary waiting period. Of course, I'm adjusting here the voluntary waiting period, and we can talk about this later. So the point is that I'm trying to compare apples to apples. So when we do that, the preg rate is 25 for the all-time AI with double opsync. It was 29% for the non-targeted program. There was the one that was in the middle, where cows have 3 weeks to show a heat. And then it's 27% for the targeted predominant heat detection program. So we don't compare these things statistically because it's not right. I mean, for our scientific papers and so on. But there you have the results. There you have the numbers. You can see what to expect and commercial farm. So this was done at a commercial farm in Minnesota by our team. And here is the part that is harder to understand, the more scientific way in which we evaluate this. We look at the pregnancy rate with the survival curves. And all that I want to tell you with this is that it was either the same or in fact is slightly better. So the targeted program is the one in the salmon color line. The non-targeted but combining heat detection is in green. And then the time AI is the line in blue. And if you understand the survival curves, you can see how they overlap with each other. And in fact, when we look at the actual ratio, the hazard ratio is a little bit better for the targeted program and the combined programs, but I don't make a whole lot out of that. The days to pregnancy, so these are average days open. You can see they are lower for the combined groups, but then the percentage of cows pregnant, you see all the lines are together here at the end. It's exactly the same. So you kind of change a little bit the speed or the shape at which you shift when cows are getting pregnant. And we know that that's what happens when you have longer voluntary waiting period for time AI programs. Again, the point that I'm trying to make with this data, either with the preg rate data from Dairy Comp or with this graph and these days open and percentage of cows pregnant is, again, the pregnancy rate during lactation and the cows pregnant at the end of lactation, or in this case by mid-lactation, is going to be the same. So the concept here, the idea is that these programs work. So for farms that are interested because they have technology for heat detection, because they prefer to use less time AI, because they don't have the labor to give the hormonal treatments, because they don't want to synchronize the cows that need to be synchronized. So this type of strategy, it has worked pretty well. And we are also, in a way, customizing the Repro program to the cow biology, what the cow can do and what the cow needs. So you can make an argument, right, that the no estrus cows are the ones that benefit the most from the time AI. They are the ones that need to be synchronized, whereas the heat cows, why are you going to synchronize them if they are going to show a heat, they're going to have good conception rate. If they are bred in heat, just let them show heat and only deal with the ones that didn't, which, by the way, I didn't show you the data in the interest of time, but about 85 to 90% of the cows are bred in heat in this group. So you only need to synchronize 10% of the cows. In this case, it's about 40% in heat, 60% time AI, right? So there is a difference. So if you let these cows show heat, they eventually will do that. And you want to have very few cows to synchronize, whereas these cows, they need a little more help. There was a little bit of a reduction in days in milk at first breeding, but I don't make a big deal out of that. I don't think that there's a whole lot of value in just looking at days in milk at first breeding. But if you do, this type of program reduces days at first breeding compared to the old time AI, but we are kind of forcing the late breeding in the time AI group. Of course, this is one way of doing it. We could spend all day looking at different ways of doing this. More days here, less days here, different time AI programs, right? So there are many ways to do it. We could use double opsing for the no heat cows, or don't give them any time to show heat. So that's all on the table. You have to work with whoever makes the decisions, veterinarians, consultants, whether a farmer by herself or himself, and think about what is the best way to do it. I show you one example, I show you what works, and from there, these things can be tweaked a little bit. Very good. So now let's move on to the second way of putting cows in buckets and trying to promote heat expression during sync protocols as a way to improve performance. So this, kind of a way to think about this and what we're trying to do. So we're trying to use the power of sync plus heat. Okay, so we don't see them as things that are opposites, but rather we're trying to synergize, get the synergy out of the use of sync protocols with heat detection. And I don't mean to have you understand any of these pictures of ovaries. This is a double opsin, an incomplete double opsin program here, and here I have some follicles and CLs. You know, what I want to leave you with is the idea that we know that double opsync or many of the fertility programs are awesome to synchronize the ovaries of cows, to synchronize ovulation, to synchronize when cows may show a heat. So we want to use the power of that. So we want to use the benefit of sync, the benefits of hormonal treatments, but use the benefits of a heat at the end of the protocol. And there's more and more research coming up that is showing that when cows show heat at the end of sync protocols, they do better. And many of you know that. Many of you see that on your farms, the farms that you work with. Cows that show a heat at the end of the protocol before the time AI and are bred, they do many times in many farms better than the cows that do not show a heat. So this is the hypothesis, the working hypothesis. This is the idea, the concept that we are chasing after, right? So that if we have a way to make cows show heat at the end of a sync protocol, we are going to be able to either increase the fertility of the whole herd or the group of cows that is bred, or at least find high fertility cows versus low fertility cows. So the cows that show heat are the high fertility cows. The cows that don't show heat end up being the low fertility cows. That may be useful for deciding which cows to put sex semen on, or the most expensive semen, or maybe we do something with the low fertility cows instead of breeding them depending on the fertility that they have. So the traditional protocols have been developed, as most of you know, to have about 56 hours from the last, the prostaglandin. So and I'll say some names here. I don't want to offend anyone, any of the pharmaceutical companies like Lutalize, Estromate, Synsure, all the prostaglandin products that we have. So PGF2 alpha, what we do to get the cow to regress her CL. So you know that we have typically 56 hours from the time of that first shot, that first treatment, until we give the last GnRH before the time AI. And then the cow is bred 16 to 18 hours later. And that's awesome. And that's what we have always wanted. And people like myself telling farms, please do this. This is the right thing to do, right? But we're always changing, right? So we're always trying to improve and trying to do things a little bit better. So now you're going to be surprised for what I'll show you a little bit. But, and I want to make this clear. This is the best that we know when we want all cows to be time bred, okay? Do not change this if you want to breed your cows through time breeding, okay? So the thing is that when you do that, you don't let cows show heat, because the moment that a cow gets a shot, gets an injection of GnRH, that blocks heat expression, that doesn't let the cow show a heat. So, question is, how can you let more cows show a heat? If we were in class, I would ask my students, so how could we do that? And you have the answer here in my green box at the bottom. So if you just give the GnRH a little bit later, then you would let the cows do what they are supposed to do, that is to show heat, right? So that's exactly what we have been exploring. And if you see the change in my slide here, is very, very simple. We go from 56 hours to 80 hours, just one day later. So if you give the GnRH on Wednesday afternoon and you time AI cows on Thursday morning, we give the GnRH on Friday, on Thursday afternoon, we give the GnRH on Thursday afternoon, and the time AI is bred, and the cows are bred through time AI on Friday morning. So here, that's very simple. So it's 80 hours, and this is a mistake. The time AI is at 96 hours from the prostaglandin shot. This is still 16 hours. We do not change the time of the breeding. I apologize. I changed that last night while I was flying, and I was a little bit tired and not thinking very well. So now the questions are, if you delay the GnRH from 56 hours to 80 hours, Do you get more cows to be bred in heat during this period of time? The answer is yes. In our studies, about 30%, in one of our studies, 30% versus 2%, right? So very low to no cows get bred in heat. If you give the gene range of 56 hours, you have a lot more cows, 30%. If you breed them, if you give the gene range at 80 hours. But as many of you know too, who you work with cows, you know that even some cows that when you go to breed them on the day of the time AI, you find them in heat there. So what I'm showing you now is the percentage of cows that show the heat all the way to the time of the breeding. And you know, we go now from 30% of the cows to 46%. Remember, we want cows to show heat, not just to breed them in heat, because the idea is that just by showing heat, that improves fertility. The effects of the hormones, estradiol, on the uterus of the cow, we don't even know exactly what happens, but we know that they show heat. If they are expressed to a heat, they do better. So in this first study, we found no significant difference, and it's not a very large difference in favor of giving the gene RH at 80 hours. It works. Okay, you can see 53% overall versus 51. It works. It's slightly better, but there's no significant difference between the treatments. So I'll show you in a moment why that's the case. But you know, it's a strategy that works. And again, I want to emphasize that what you gain by doing that is breeding more cows before the time AI. So that may be beneficial for some farms that want to breed fewer cows on the time AI day. Plus, you can almost tell which cows are going to have high fertility and which cows are going to have low fertility. And here you have it. In the G80 group, these are the cows. The 61% was the conception rate for the 30% of the cows that were bred in heat before the time AI. 61% for those ones, 61% for the ones that made it to the time AI, but also show the heat before the time AI, right? So they express heat. So those are like 55 or so, no, more than that. It's like 75% of the cows total. 75% of the cows that you know that they're going to be high fertility. And then you have the ones that make it to the time AI. This means time AI, no estrus, right? The ones that never show the heat up to the point of the time AI, and those are the low fertility cows. So once again, the idea is that, well, you know, overall, you may not improve a whole lot, but from a management perspective, you may be able to spread the breedings, and then you have a group of cows that you know that they want to have high fertility, and you could do something different. Again, the idea of sex semen or something different with these cows that are high fertility. Of course, we're not going to be happy with this 37%. We're going to try to figure out how can we improve the fertility of these cows, right? Is there anything that we can do? Or is it that they just didn't have enough time to show a heat? So trying to figure out what to do with the cows that have 37%, we did another trial recently where we put the cows through double love sync, and we gave them, instead of 80 hours to show a heat, we said, let's give them a whole week to show heat, try to breed as many cows in heat as possible, and then let's enroll the rest of the cows on a cedar sync. So again, we're trying to breed as many cows in heat as possible, optimize follicle development and so on. And then we are trying now to improve the fertility of the tail end, those cows that had 37%. So how can we improve the fertility? So overall, we can have better fertility than when we put all the cows on a double option. So we did a trial where we compared just what I described, the double option with the heat breedings afterwards versus the double option with the delayed time AI. And then these cows, again, they get the cedar sync. And finally, first, this is important too. I jumped the gun earlier. But so 88%, so almost 90% of the cows are bred in heat. So you have very few cows that need to go to the cedar sync in this group. I hope that that makes sense, right? So 80%, 88% were bred in heat, and only a small percentage needed to get the cedar sync. but this is what I wanted to get to. So we finally were able to find a significant difference, and more than anything, an improvement. Now, this whole program, which you can argue is a little bit more complicated from some perspective. So now 56% overall for all cows that went through, 56% versus 49% overall. So 7% gain in overall first service conception rate. And then just as we predicted and we expected, right? So the cows that are bred in heat, AIE means bred in heat, 57%. I mean, you now have 90% of the cows with really, really high fertility. And you only have a small percentage, 12%, 10%, that with the Cedar Sync program, we were able to improve their fertility a little bit, okay? So again, we think, that, this may be a way to go. We have to do more studies, try to replicate this and make sure that this works. But, we do think that, it's a potential alternative to explore. So finishing up with the estrus thing, again, we can use heats either during the voluntary waiting period or at the end of sync protocols to predict potentially to increase fertility, right? So we can, find a way to improve fertility. It's a little bit more involved than, what we typically do, but still can work, okay? So very quickly, in the last few minutes that I have, I'll talk quickly about just putting cows on different buckets depending on their ovarian status. And this is something that we have been working for a while, and we have some great programs that we have developed over time and some farms are using. So we're going to put cows on buckets based on what they have on their ovaries. So we're going to have the bucket for cows that have a CL. So I'm having some issues here with my computer. The cows that have a CL on their ovaries and a follicle more than 15 versus the cows that don't. Very simple. Preg check, open cows, get a program. Non-pregnant cows with no CL get a different program. So I'm going to show you two examples, two programs that we have proven to be successful, two programs that have some differences that farms should be aware and that are important at the time of deciding which of these programs to emphasize, okay? So we have the first one, which is what we call the short resync plus P4 off-sync or Cedar Sync. In this case, we don't do anything with cows until the preg check at 32 days because we are trying to breed as many cows in heat as possible. We are trying to not bother heat expression here. We have nothing to do before the preg check. So when the cows are found open, that's when we put the CL cows in the short resync part, and then we put the no CL cows in the Cedar Sync or P4 off-sync part. And I'll show you now in more detail what this program is and an alternative for farms that cannot do that. And again, so what we're trying to do here is breed as many cows in heat as possible, rebreed 70 to 75% of the cows as soon as possible after they're called open. So this is 3 days later. And the no CL cows, which they wouldn't do very well in this program, those cows we are trying to improve their fertility by putting them in the Cedar Sync program. So only 25–30% of the cows get that program. One thing that is very important to recognize is that this short resync will not result in the highest conception rate. The conception rate is going to be somewhere in the low to mid 30s, and this is important. There are some dairies that are not very happy with that. But remember, the point of this program is to breed as many cows in heat as possible, have fewer cows to synchronize, and still be able to rebreed a vast majority of the cows within a short interbreeding interval. So for the no CL cows, either a Cedar Sync, which you have in here is the off-sync protocol with a Cedar during the 7 days, nothing new here, the 2 prostaglandins at the end. Farms that cannot use a Cedar Sync or just will not use a Cedar Sync due to cost or preference, they can use what we call the pre-G off-sync or GGPG, which is basically give GnRH when the cow is found open. So here on this day, cows get GnRH. and then a week later, they start the opsin protocol with the 2 prostaglandins. These programs, we have proven in multiple studies that are both good. They are excellent programs for these no-CL cows, and you can expect to have the same fertility, the same conception rate for no-CL cows. So somewhere in the 35 to 40% range is what you can expect to have with these programs for these no-CL cows, okay? So it works pretty well for these cows, and it's effective. Now, the last program that I'll show you is the one in which we actually give the GnRH to cows here at the end, at the beginning of the protocol, I'm sorry. So we breed cows in heat for 25 days or so. Here we give GnRH, okay? So the difference with the short resync is that we do give all cows the GnRH, okay? And the big difference with this is that fewer cows are going to be bred in heat because we are giving this GnRH. But then the fertility, so the conception rate of the 80 to 85% of the cows that make it all the way to the CL group time AI program is going to be better. And here I have the difference in cows bred in heat is about 10% fewer cows are bred in heat when they get the GnRH versus not getting the GnRH here on day 25. So we are going to have fewer cows in heat when we give the GnRH. But the fertility is going to be better. And in multiple studies, the fertility was about 8 percentage points better for the cows that got the GnRH. Okay, so you may be wondering, so why would I not give the GnRH, right? If I know that I'm going to have better conception rate. So the reason for that is that the pregnancy rate, so the speed at which the cows get pregnant after first breeding, when you give the GnRH or don't give the GnRH, so when you use the short resync or the day 25 resync is the same. So in our experiments, in 2 experiments at commercial farms, the fertility was the same. So there is no difference in the pregnancy rate and the percentage of cows pregnant at the end of lactation. So both programs are effective. Both programs are good, and they are better than the average program using just opsin for all cows, not putting cows in the CL versus no CL bucket. And I didn't show you the data, but we have the data that shows that both of these programs are better than that. Now, the short resync, so the one without the GnRH, you can see on my title here, they are preferred for farms that are really successful with heat detection. So you want to put your eggs on the heat detection basket, and you want to breed fewer cows through time AI. So you don't give the GnRH, you have a little lower fertility, but you optimize performance by not giving the GnRH and breeding more cows in heat. When you give the GnRH, fewer cows bred in heat, a lot more shots, a lot more cows get these shots because all the pregnant cows have to get this shot of GnRH. You have fewer cows bred in heat, so there are more cows to preg check, more cows to synchronize. So for farms that are not good with heat detection, this may be good because you put your eggs on the time AI basket. So you do better through time AI, okay? But you're not optimizing heat detection, you're synchronizing a lot of cows. So you have to decide what type of strategies is better for your farm, for your client farms, to decide with which one to go. So buckets for targeted repro management, we talked about 3 types. Heats during the voluntary waiting periods, heat during the sync protocol, or the use of ovarian status at pregnancy check-in or non-pregnancy diagnosis. So I have shown you that these strategies can work. They can improve performance management of both. What we use to put cows in buckets can be slightly different. What we do with cows in different buckets is a little bit different, okay? But it works, and it can help optimize certain aspects of herd management that depends on farm. We still have a lot of work to do, so stay tuned for more as we learn more and more from our research and that of others. I want to make sure that I thank the people that make all my research possible, my graduate students, technicians, and all our collaborators. Thanks a lot for your time, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Julio, for this. There's certainly a lot to look back and think again about all the information you just gave us. So before we start with the questions, I want to thank again our sponsor, CattleScan, for this webinar series. And remember that we still have 2 webinars on the next weeks. Right. So for questions, we already have a lot of them. First one. Does the increase in conception with showing a hit in the voluntary waiting period matter if the hit was natural or induced via hormones? If you give a shot of PGF to induce a hit and not breathe, will you still see an increase in the first conception?
Excellent question. And we don't know. We have no data specifically for this. What I will tell you is that research for years and years has shown that there is no difference between heats induced by hormones and heats that are natural, okay? Especially heats induced by hormones with just prostaglandin, like the question that is being asked during the voluntary waiting period. Now, I have to make an exception now because I just showed you data that if you make a cow show heat at the end of double opsing, that may be a different deal, okay? That may well be different, but just after the prostaglandin shots or treatments that we give during the voluntary waiting period, I would not expect that there is a difference. But to the question 2, the vast majority of the research that is out there from us and other research groups has always been done with not giving prostaglandin during the voluntary waiting period. The cows are not touched during the voluntary waiting period. They just show heat on their own. Thanks.
Okay, great. Now, another question that we got is, when finding high versus low fertility cows, does this bucket apply to future lactations? If she's labeled low fertility, she could continue with that assumption over the next lactation, for example?
Great question. And the short answer is yes, but yes from the perspective of the genetic potential of the cow to be a cow more likely to show estrus, okay? You know that the ability, so reproduction, right, depends on the cow genetics and the environmental effects, right? All the management factors that affect the cow, right? So I don't know if the environmental effects will transfer to the next lactation. I don't know if the fact that a cow didn't get sick in this lactation after calving is going to affect her ability to show estrus again in the subsequent lactation. I have no data to show you that. I could tell you that a cow that does well in this lactation is very likely to do well in the subsequent one because she gets pregnant at the right time and she calves at the right time. And that whole story, you know, what we now call the high fertility cycle, right? When cows get pregnant at the right time because they started showing heats early, they do better in the next lactation. But from a genetics perspective, and I spare you from that data today, but we have some beautiful data from some very large experiment that we did in 6 farms. And there is, as everyone probably knows, there is an association between genetics and fertility potential, DPR, right? And, you know, high DPR cows tend to do better in subsequent lactations, and low DPR cows, if they survive, right, if they stay for subsequent lactations, they tend to do well. But so I think that the genetics is transferred, the genetic effect is more likely to be observed in subsequent lactations. Some of the environmental effects may be observed as well, right?
Right, great. I see a couple of questions having like some doubts about the 2 PGF shots in the off-sync program. So I don't know if you could explain a little further why is it done.
So you're asking about the use of 2 prostaglandins
in the off-sync, exactly, or in the non
program. It's all the same.
Yeah.
Let me get to one of my slides. So here, okay. I hope everyone, so my slides, Daniela, you still see them?
Yep, I still see them.
Very good. So the reason why we give the second prostaglandin 24 hours after the first is because not 100% of the cows will have complete luteal regression, which is what we give cows prostaglandin for. So we're trying to regress the CL. Okay, so actually I have a better slide to show you, is the one with double opsin and the ovaries. Okay, I'll get there. So not 100% of the cows will have complete luteal regression with a single prostaglandin. So the use of the second prostaglandin is to increase the percentage of cows that regress their CL. So try to get it to as close as possible to 100%. Okay, so here you have the CL. When you give a single prostaglandin, there will be anywhere from 10 to 15% of the cows that will not regress the CL completely. When you give the two prostaglandins, it's going to be 2 to 3% of the cows. It's not 100%, but it's almost 100% of the cows that have complete luteal regression. And progesterone concentrations, which have to be the lowest possible here, are really, really low.
Great, that's a great explanation. Thank you. We have, I think, two more questions. Time for two more questions. When we use double opsync, is there any difference in time of insemination between conventional or sex semen?
Good question. So in general, no. And I'll say that there is not a lot of research to support what I'm telling you. So it's a little more anecdotal. Most of the research that has been done with different timing of insemination for sex semen has been done with heifers, okay, not with lactating cows on double opsync. So it's anecdotal. I'll tell you that farms that I work with that have increased the use of sex semen have not changed anything in their timing of insemination, and they are doing fantastic. And the ratio of conception rate with sex versus conventional is the same that is expected.
Okay, great. I think last question, what about economics of high pregnancy rate, more than 30, and practical side on large scale dairies? For the management point of view, isn't it better to keep it as simple as possible once we reach very high pregnancy rate percentages?
Well, I'll start by the second one. And the answer is all dairies are different and doing what's best for individual dairies. So I don't have the answer myself. I mean, I think that that's something that producers, along with their consultants, have to decide. I advocate for simple. And thanks for asking that question, because it allows me to say the following. This whole concept of targeted management, it's only valuable if it's simple, okay? So the dairy must have tools that make this simple. And the thing is that we do have the tools today. So there's nothing to wait for, okay? So you have an automated estrus detection system that sends the heat alerts to the dairy herd management software, let's say DairyComp, and you store them there. And when it's time to enroll cows in program A versus B, you don't see anything. The computer does it all. So cows are going to be given the time to show heat that they have to be given based on the group that they are in. And it's very, very simple to do. It's just a 1 or a 0 in a DairyComp command, right? Heat cows are a 1, no heat cows are a 0. And the 1 cows go this way, the 0 cows go the other way. The example of looking at ovaries at the time of pregnancy diagnosis is CL cow goes here, no CL cows go there. The cows are treated immediately. They are entering DairyComp as CL, no CL, and you forget about it. You just know that you have to give them the treatments, okay? So, you know, technology facilitates, and it must be used to facilitate the implementation of these programs. And the first question, Daniela, was, yeah, I always get that question. I cannot get away from it, apparently. So the pregnancy rate, so in my opinion, so most of you must be familiar with, this curve, that shows the law of diminishing returns for preg rate after the mid-20s to the low 30s. That as you increase the preg rate after 28-30%, it doesn't pay economically, right? And the truth is that a lot of those curves, so all of them come from simulation models, okay? That doesn't come from, research done on farms, because it's impossible to do. So everything comes from simulation models. And most of those curves have been generated with simulation models that cannot capture some of the opportunities that we have today. In particular, the use of beef on dairy, cooling cows based on multiple criteria. So some of the things that these progressive dairies that have these high preg rates are doing are not captured by those models. So my gut feeling, my experience with, all the work that we do, is that I think that those curves have changed, and I think that there's still more to gain after the low 30s. I don't know where it flattens, where it will plateau, but I believe that there is still more to gain, especially with the crazy beef on dairy prices these days, and reducing the number of heifers to raise, and all of that, labor costs, increasing, and all of the factors that are critical for dairy economics and efficiency. So I think there's more opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think in the time that we have, that's it for today. So thank you again so much, Julio, for doing this.